Hello, I'm Jim Cornell, and this is Base to Base, the weekly biotech podcast from Air Coastal Media. Yes, welcome again to the Base to Base biotech podcast, and this is number 36, going out on November the 21st. An uneventful week for a change as I rest a bit and avoid the cold outdoors, which is odd considering I spent more than 30 years in Canada, where it's a tad colder than Scotland. Last week we had conversations about Gothenburg Tech Week. We also talked to Levicept about pain and osteoarthritis, and we talked respiratory viruses with Enna Respiratory. This week we're chatting with Iris Örhn from Business Region Gothenburg, Robert Bunn, founder and president of Ultrasound AI, and Laura MacNeill, CEO of the Charcot-Marie-Tooth Research Foundation. If you do have news or suggestions for who should be on the podcast, or indeed any other suggestions or comments, please do get in touch at jim@deeptechdigest.com, which is also the address you can use if you're interested in advertising with us or sponsoring a podcast episode. Alright, so first let's take a look at the news you may have missed over at deeptechdigest.com. A bird flu vaccine trial shows signs of a broad immune response. A breakthrough gives hope to those battling an aggressive form of blood cancer, and a new technique may open up a route to tackling deep lung tumours. A new clinical trial could boost the fight against neglected tropical diseases, and a recent genetic discovery links neurological disorders and psychiatric illnesses. Scottish Brain Sciences is opening a new Alzheimer's clinical research centre. A study reveals how cancer cells break through tight gaps in tissue, and SAS Clinical Acceleration has launched to modernise clinical trials and accelerate time to market. What's being hailed as groundbreaking obesity drug data were revealed. Sofinova Partners closed a $750 million fund, and Fast Track designation was received for a diagnostic agent for clear cell renal cell carcinoma. A new technique could speed up the design of drugs that target proteins, and you can read all of these and plenty more at deeptechdigest.com. So let's get to those interviews. First, this week we're talking about ultrasound images, because a company called Ultrasound AI has developed a platform whereby ultrasound images of unborn babies can be scanned and extremely accurate results obtained very quickly. To tell us how it was achieved and what it all means is Ultrasound AI founder and president Robert Bunn. Maybe to get things going then, maybe you could give me a bit of the background on Ultrasound AI.
Sure. So I'm originally a data scientist and a software developer. That's what I've been doing for about 30 years. I was working in the oil industry maybe about 8 years ago, I'd say. And the oil industry was fun. You did something worthwhile, I think. But I didn't feel like it was, a good use of my talents, or I didn't feel like it was a good use of, serving other people. I didn't think I was really changing anything either with that, even though it was a job that needed to be done. I didn't feel like I was getting, value out of my life for doing it. And so I got to thinking about new problems that maybe I could solve using AI, because AI was just barely starting to make waves around that time. And I got to thinking, well, what problems could AI solve that might have an impact on humanity? And as it turns out, my wife's had numerous miscarriages by that time. And I got to thinking it seems ridiculous that you could have one miscarriage after another, and there's nothing that can be done about it. So I started looking at how that's possible, because I want to understand that, on a personal level, how is nothing able to be done about this? And after doing a bit of research, I figured out that the reason that there is so many premature births and miscarriages is because early detection is extremely inaccurate or non-existent in some cases. And by the time a woman goes into labor, it's pretty much too late to do anything at that time. You basically have to just deal with the fallout. And so I got to thinking, well, if we could give the doctor much more warning, or at least any warning at all, that this premature birth or miscarriage is impending, then perhaps there are things the doctors can do about it. And I looked in a bit into that too. And there are things that doctors can do to prevent these things if they have some kind of warning of the situation. And so, although I have no medical background whatsoever, I decided I was going to set out to revolutionize the field of obstetrics. Probably completely delusional at the time, but sometimes, passion will lead you in directions that might not make good sense, maybe. But I figured I got to solve this problem. I can't continue, letting this happen. So I got a bunch of data of ultrasound images of pregnant women, and I also got the delivery dates. And basically my plan was, if I could predict the delivery date or miscarriage date of a baby, and the doctor could decide if that's good or not good, or if they need to do anything or not do anything. Now, I talked to several doctors about this idea, before I really got too deep into it. And they told me, we've been looking at ultrasounds for 30 years. And if it were possible to predict delivery dates from the ultrasound images, or even predict premature births from the ultrasound images, we'd be doing it already. And I guess I'm not a good listener. I just don't accept this is how we always have done things. Therefore, this is how we're always going to do things. And I guess sometimes in this case, ignorance is bliss, because since I had no medical background, I didn't know what was impossible. And when you don't know what's impossible, sometimes that makes it a little easier to do, I suppose. So what I did was I took all that ultrasound data I had, and I built a supercomputer from parts in my basement, because obviously those are extremely expensive. I have the money for that. And I spent the next year basically trying to create an AI that could look at just the ultrasound images of these fetuses and predict their delivery date accurately. And after a year of this, it was failing miserably. I was getting nowhere. I was wasting a lot of time, and nothing was happening. I was beginning to wonder if the doctors were right. Maybe I should just move on, try something different. They gave me some other ideas of things that I could try out that might be more straightforward. I'm like, I'll keep going with it. So sometimes persistence is a valuable thing too. So one night I set off a new experiment, went to bed. It was really late. And by the time I got to bed, I realized that the experiment that I just set off wasn't going to work. It couldn't work. I made some dumb mistakes in it, but I was too tired. It was 1 a.m. I figured I'd just deal with it in the morning, let it run overnight, and fix it in the morning. So I did that and woke up the next morning, and shockingly, it was working. So what that means is everything that I thought could work over a whole year failed miserably. And the one thing that I was certain could not work is what actually worked. And I guess that's a common theme in medicine and science. Sometimes a little dumb luck never hurts, right? Right place, right time. Or sometimes you just keep going until you get lucky with a discovery too. And there, I guess that might have been partially my case. Anyhow, it looks like I got something working. And what I did was went back to those doctors, hoping they would be excited about this. I'd solved this problem everyone thought was, impossible to solve. And they basically said, you must have made a mistake. This is absolutely not possible. You must have made a mistake in your code or how you did your validation or something. I guess I should have expected that response in hindsight, but I didn't. And so what I had to do at that point was prove that this could work independently. So I hooked up with the University of Kentucky. We worked on a collaboration where they gave me they gave me all their data, all the women's health data to work on this project, and they held back 20% of it so that I couldn't know the answers to it, so we could be 100% certain that it worked and that I wasn't making any mistakes in my code. There was no way for me to do that if I didn't have the answers to begin with. And after 4 years of iterating back and forth and doing the validation on their validation set, we finally published our paper in the journal Neonatology, I believe it is, basically proving that, in fact, yes, you can predict delivery dates and miscarriage dates from ultrasound imaging alone. Obviously, that's a revolutionary change in obstetrics, considering how inaccurate, it is to predict delivery dates, especially premature births and miscarriages, is basically non-existent at all. So being able to predict the delivery date of a premature baby it just blew people's minds that was possible. So that's kind of how I got on this, and that's where we started. Is once we got to that point, then investors would take it seriously, and then we could now really make some great things happen.
How does the AI actually help with the analysis of ultrasound? What is it that it's doing that can pick this out that humans can't?
Sure. Yeah. So one issue with ultrasound images, I don't know how many people have actually looked at an ultrasound image. Probably most people, I guess, at some point. And when you look at them, they look very noisy, almost like a 70s TV set, if that good even. And it's very hard to see things in them because the noise could be something, or the noise could be covering up something, or the noise could create an illusion of something that's actually not there. There's all kinds of problems with ultrasound imaging. The reason I thought that was a good task for AI is because that's the kind of thing where AI excels. It doesn't have a bias, an internal bias as to what it should be seeing. Because as humans, we kind of see what we want to see sometimes. We're looking for things, specific things, and we completely miss things that are there just because of our preconceived notions about what we should be seeing. AI doesn't have that problem. Also, AI is pretty good at being able to see through noise without hallucinating, what that noise might actually be instead of just being noise. The fact that AI can do that and also learn from millions of images, which humans can't do, obviously. I mean, I'm sure no doctor has looked through millions of images and compared them to the outcomes and tried to find patterns in the image that, predicts the outcome. So, I mean, that's one thing that AI can do that humans just don't have the time to do. Another thing that AI can do is it can distinguish shades of gray that are much harder for the human eye to distinguish because it's just looking at a big set of numbers and not an image as a human eye might see it. So there's numerous reasons why AI is actually useful for this and can do things that humans cannot do. For example, no human can predict the delivery date of a premature birth or a miscarriage at all. Like that is completely non-existent until now. And currently when the doctor predicts a delivery date, just so everyone understands this, they're just predicting at what time does that baby become 40 weeks old. When you get a delivery date from your doctor, that's just the date the baby becomes 40 weeks, not the date, not based on anything else about that situation.
When it comes to a human looking at an image, an ultrasound image, what are the challenges that poses to a human that AI doesn't have?
Yeah, one problem I think too is that humans have a lot of bias, preconceived notions about what they expect to see when they treat a patient because they know things about this patient already that might change the probability of a premature birth or miscarriage with that birth. And so they might see a patient that seems perfectly normal and is low risk. And when they look at their ultrasound images, they have that preconceived notion in their head that this is going to be a low risk baby, and they might miss things in the ultrasound image or vice versa. But I think really where AI shines is it can simply find patterns in these images that the human mind simply can't comprehend, and it can see things in the images that the human eye simply can't see or extremely difficult for the human eye to see. So I think those are the two main things.
Right. And you mentioned the fact that it's not been possible and still isn't possible to visually say when a baby's going to be born. So how accurate is the system that you've developed?
Yeah, we can actually catch most preterm births as early as 8 weeks into the pregnancy, and that's just completely revolutionary in obstetrics. 90% of the time, we get basically 90% accuracy on these predictions, which is also revolutionary. And for anyone that likes to dig into the statistics of all this, they're welcome to look up our pair paper. For people that understand things like R-squared values, the R-squared value for the delivery timing is 0.92, which is very close to 1, which would be perfect answers. So it's certainly much better than what humans are able to do right now, of course.
And I guess a lot of the concerns over pregnancy are if there's something wrong with the baby or if something isn't quite right. Are you able to detect things that need addressing, or if you're able to predict that some baby's going to be born early, are there interventions that can help with any issues?
Oh, yes, yes. The most notable one, I suppose, is a drug called progesterone, and that's commonly used for women that are at high risk of premature birth because they've had previous premature births, for example. And by the way, that's how doctors typically determine risk, is previous miscarriages, previous premature birth. So a woman on her first child wouldn't have a lot of the risk factors doctors normally look for. But yeah, so progesterone is commonly used, but it's also overused right now because currently the accuracy of predicting premature birth is highly inaccurate. So they are giving treatment to women who probably don't need it. So that is one thing that we're fixing, is more accurately determining who actually needs these interventions and treatments, so we can reduce overtreatment of pregnant women, which is happening right now, and make sure, for example, women who are on their first child who don't have any risk factors because they don't have any previous children, we can catch them on their first premature birth and actually help on that, which is completely new, because if you don't have any risk factors, then you would just be classified as low risk and then go to your regular obstetrician for visits. But in many cases, we can catch the premature births on these first children, the firstborn, and that allows us to intervene in those cases where before that really wasn't happening.
Could you tell me what delivery date AI and preterm AI are?
They're basically the same thing. Delivery date AI predicts the actual delivery date of a baby, not the 40-week date, but whether it's a miscarriage or premature birth or a normal birth. Preterm AI is basically an AI that just gives you the probability that a baby is going to be born premature or not premature. So they go hand in hand in this case.
Are other companies doing anything in AI and ultrasound? Maybe not necessarily with regards to pregnancy, but is it an area of companies are doing a lot with?
No one's doing this. For one, we have the patent on it, I suppose, is one reason why that is. But also, I still have some trade secrets on how I created this model too. So I'm not sure if people just haven't been able to figure it out, or haven't been able to get enough data to duplicate this, or simply would rather move into a space where there's no competition. There's pregnancy AI in ultrasound for other things, like identifying fetal anomalies, the exact gestational age of the baby, things like that, but nothing that changes the game so much as this.
Obviously, AI is constantly evolving. Is ultrasound evolving too?
Every year, the image quality and the detail certainly gets better. I mean, the latest images I've seen from Samsung and GE are significantly better than the ones that I started training on. And luckily, as these ultrasound manufacturers keep improving their algorithms, the AI is able to leverage more of that detail and quality to get improved predictions. So, and there's the flip side where the AI in general keeps making advances, maybe unrelated to ultrasound, but AI in general makes advances pretty rapidly, as you know. And I think the two situations will lead to a situation where we're going to have much better accuracy in a year from now, 2 years from now, the same way AI gets better every year. Combining better ultrasound technology with better AI technology is going to continue to allow us to continue to push the boundaries of what's possible here.
And is access to those images ever an issue, or going to be an issue, do you think?
Well, medical data is extremely hard to get. I have to be forever grateful for the University of Kentucky for believing in me and this project, because they had somewhat of the same opinions some of the other doctors did, but they were willing to take a chance on it, because if it did work, it would revolutionize their field. And I think they had the same skepticism, but they were willing to take a chance on it and others wouldn't. And so it was a 2-year process, I believe, to get the data from University of Kentucky, because you have to deal with all kinds of committees and make sure the data is anonymized, to protect patient privacy. There's all kinds of bureaucracy at large medical institutions you got to deal with. But once we were able to get the data, then it was all downhill from there. But medical data is extremely hard to get in the United States. and they rarely give it to small little startups. So it was almost like a winning lottery ticket that I found a university that was willing to work with me on this, considering most people expected it not to work at all. So
Where are you at on that pathway to commercialization right now in terms of regulatory and all those things?
sure. So we are fully approved in Brazil, and have been in use in Brazil for about a year. We are also in Chile and have been in use in Chile for about a year as well. And so we do actually have a track record of real clinical usage and actually amazing outcomes, really amazing testimonials from others who used our technology, and the doctors feel it helps the outcome turn out to be much better than it would have otherwise. And so that's where we are in those two countries. So we're active in two. We're wrapping up our FDA approval in the United States right now. So if all goes well and there's no more back and forth with the FDA, we hope to have approval here very soon, and then of course can make this available to all the women in the United States.
How will you get that out to all of the different places?
It's actually very easy to connect to us. Our AI is run in the cloud on AWS, and all the doctors really have to do is just connect their ultrasound machines to us. And then after they do a scan, just press a button and the images get sent to us, and then we send them back their predictions. So it's pretty straightforward. It really is the business model that's the complicated part about here, because doctors want to use it, the value is obvious, but then it's just there's so many stakeholders in healthcare that it's challenging to navigate the business model of who's paying for it, who's getting the value out of it. That's actually been by far the most challenging thing of all, not the technology, strangely.
Well, I can imagine that would be the case. Yeah. How are you communicating with all of the physicians across the country? Or how will you?
Well, we have been. We go to SMFM every year, which is the Society of Maternal Fetal Medicine, which is another way to say a high-risk obstetrician. That's where the high-risk pregnancies go. And so obviously that's probably our core customer base is those folks. And so we have a booth at this conference every year. And of course, the doctors are extremely excited about it. And they constantly ask me, when are you getting FDA approval? When are you getting FDA approval? When are you getting approval? Because they want to start using it immediately. That's mostly how we interact, as our yearly booth at that, but also our published paper, our peer-reviewed paper that we published a while ago too. Doctors are able to see the science for themselves and the results for themselves. So there's not much skepticism that this works anymore. I think we've fairly well established that this does work, and now the doctors are like, well, when can I use it? And we have several, both smaller practices and larger conglomerates, who want to use this immediately upon approval.
It's always a good sign for sure. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Is this some technology that's applicable to other things than pregnancy?
Oh yeah, absolutely. One thing that we learned, I guess I should take a step back to something we found out that's really interesting, is not only are we able to predict spontaneous premature births, we're actually able to predict the delivery dates of babies where the doctors had to induce the mothers prematurely to save their life, because they had a life-threatening condition. And extremely surprisingly, even I was surprised, and I'm pretty optimistic about everything here. I was surprised to find out that, yes, AI actually can predict a future medical event that will require a doctor to induce prematurely, and that will be the baby's delivery date. And it's actually slightly more accurate in that scenario than in the spontaneous delivery scenario. So that's one thing I learned, is it can predict future medical events. So I also had a lot of data from the University of Kentucky of other angles of pregnancy, if you will, and I tried it out to determine, could it do other things, like, for example, help identify ovarian cancer better, help identify fetal anomalies or various growth problems, and it can do all these things quite well, certainly better than humans. And so now it seems like the sky's the limit, because I keep trying this new technology out on all these different healthcare issues or conditions, and it does well on most of them. And so I think a revolution is coming for AI, especially in medical imaging, due to the fact that it's so much more powerful for this particular problem than the human eye and the human brain is. So I think miraculous things are coming soon.
Clearly, you need to be reimbursed for what you're doing, but also clearly you want to be able to help as many people as possible. How does cost affect things, especially for those who aren't necessarily in a position to be able to afford these things?
Well, my mission is to make sure every woman on earth has access to this technology, regardless of ability to pay. So in all the richer countries, this is not such a big deal. Women could pay out of pocket for it. Insurance companies will likely cover it due to the savings in the NICU, because if you can catch a premature birth early and prevent it, you save a fortune in NICU bills. So obviously, insurance companies are really loving this technology too. What the plan is that we can, for example, women in, say, I don't know, Uganda or Cambodia or whatever country that might not be as wealthy, obviously they're not going to be able to afford the price that the people in Europe or United States can. So what I decided what we can certainly do is allow them to trade their anonymized images, and we can use those to help improve the algorithm, and then we can give them also the algorithm for free in exchange for those images. So not only does every woman on earth get access to technology without, regardless of their ability to pay, they're also helping to contribute to make the AI better for everyone in the world too. That's kind of the plan that I have right now to make sure this gets out to everyone, because ultrasound is extremely common worldwide because it's very cheap, and handheld ultrasounds are getting cheaper by the day. And then of course, internet access is not that difficult in most countries now. So this is something that we can get out to most of the world actually fairly quickly.
And as you said, it's not something that can only be done in a certain place. It's just it's a pretty easy process.
Sure, you can do it with a handheld ultrasound. Many of these doctors in remote villages in, say, Brazil, or pick a country, Argentina, wherever you want. But in the remote villages, they commonly have handheld ultrasound, and that's all they need to use our technology. It doesn't require any special scans, any special imaging, any special training. The doctors just collect whatever images they were before for the reasons they have always been doing it, and that's all our AI needs. So even a midwife in Uganda could collect the images necessary to use on our AI. It doesn't require a highly skilled or specially trained medical doctor necessarily.
How quickly do they get a result?
Within 30 seconds, depending on the internet connection, how fast it can upload the images. Typically, the biggest bottleneck. So in the United States, it would be maybe 15 to 30 seconds. Slower internet might be a few minutes, but since we're predicting something that's going to happen 4 months in the future, whether it takes a minute or 5 minutes doesn't really matter. The patient's still there, and I think that's another benefit of this is you can begin acting on the results that you find immediately while the patient's still there. If you go get an MRI or something, you don't get the results for maybe a couple days, and your doctor waits back, and you have to go back and see the doctor again. But in this case, the doctor will know immediately and can begin acting on that immediately.
Yeah, which is another great thing, but also in terms of the finances of it, it makes a big difference as well when you can do something immediately.
Oh yeah, I think that changes a lot because some women don't have a whole lot of time to keep going back to the doctor every going back, they got jobs and they got, lives, and like everyone else does, and continuous going back to the doctor is kind of a huge inconvenience, and sometimes people just don't do it. And so I think this will help out those people who just don't have time to go to the doctor as often as they would like or should.
It might seem like it's minor, but even a sustainability issue, doing one road journey instead of being on the road 4 times is a saving in carbon footprint. So there's that as well.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of benefits to that for sure. Just keeping health costs down. I mean, if you can use 1 visit instead of 2, I mean, then that doctor can use that second visit for someone else. So I think it also helps kind of bend the cost curve down too, as well as reducing, NICU bills, which is, one of the bigger outlays of money for insurance companies is cancer and obstetrics. So anything we can do to, move the needle in this case will save our healthcare systems a significant amount of money.
And when it comes to awareness, I know November is Premature Birth Awareness Month. How important are things like that?
I mean, women's health in general, I think, needs more awareness of the issues that it has and some of the problems within it. I don't think women's health has gotten the same attention and resources and research, as men's health. And I think, having a month like this makes the general public aware of these problems, and maybe the general public can help prioritize these problems once they're aware. Because I think it's hard to get the general public, people to push their politicians to work on a problem if they aren't even aware of how important that problem is, and what can be done about it, and that the problem even exists. So I think awareness is the first step towards, improving women's healthcare in general.
I didn't think about it at the time, but amazingly, I did my master's thesis on ultrasound decades ago. What's amazing is that it was actually around back then. Although having said that, it has been around since the 1940s. I hasten to add that I haven't. The first time I ever saw ultrasound in action was before I went to university, when I had a sports injury and they put very cold gloop on my knee and all of the ultrasound images were inconclusive. I did tend to get injured quite a lot, but it's incredible to see how far it's come and how far AI can take that. So, a great tool from Ultrasound AI there, making a huge difference. Next, it's over to Sweden again for another interview from NLS Days in Gothenburg. Business Region Göteborg promotes lots of regional industries, as you would expect, but one of the rising stars is the life sciences sector. Of the 1.1 million people, roughly, in Gothenburg, between 11 and 12,000 work in life sciences. To help promote the amazing city in the life sciences field is Iris Örhn, investment advisor at Business Region Gothenburg. All right, so tell me everything you know about Gothenburg.
Okay, so I can tell you a lot about Gothenburg because I've been working for Gothenburg Investment and Promotion Agency, which is also the economic development office in the region for about 15 years. And what I do is I'm actually in charge of international collaborations and foreign direct investments within life sciences. It's actually promoting Gothenburg and telling everybody the story about Gothenburg life sciences. So what can I tell you? Gothenburg is the second largest city in Sweden, but we also have the second largest cluster in Sweden with regards to life science. We have about 600 companies. I would say it could be 18%, 19% of the Swedish life science industry is located here. What makes Gothenburg different from all other life science clusters in Sweden, I would say one thing is the culture. And this is really true. This is not just repeating what everybody says. It's the culture of collaboration and trust that has been very important to get large companies like AstraZeneca or JTN or MacNeill Healthcare to actually open their doors and have companies working with them, sometimes even establishing them inside, which is an example that you can meet later on, which is the AstraZeneca BioVenture Hub, in which one of us AstraZeneca's global R&D centers located here have 30 companies already working in there with the same key. That's an example. And what else can I say? I say Gothenburg because of the port. We are one of the most industrialized regions in Scandinavia, so we have a lot of industry. And this is something that has not only impacted the life science sector, but all sectors. And this means that we have a very strong medtech area. We have, of course, diagnostics, biotech, pharma, but the medtech industry is very strong here. So we have many global medtech companies located here. And what we have seen during the last years is a transition of medtech companies working more with pharma companies, but working also with other companies like Volvo, which is the largest company in Sweden. And Gothenburg is the home of Volvo, something you might have noted from when you landed in the airport. Talking about life science and the areas of strengths, I would say ATMPs, cell therapy and tissue engineering. And this is not just saying what everybody's saying. And the reason for that is because we have the largest hospital in the Nordics, and it's the Swedish Center for Transplantation. So we have been working with cell, tissue engineering, implants for a long time. We have actually the only ATMP center for children in Sweden and the Nordics, located in Gothenburg. So apart from the area related to surgical transplantation, implants, all of that, we are also very strong in health tech and digital health. And it is because this IT sector that has been very engaged before in the automotive industry and the mobility industry, because of what we have seen now globally, with the battery and the self-drive cars, etc. These competence have found in the life science sector a new sector. So as you know, we are in the middle of a transformation, talking about healthcare and digitalization. And the Nordics as a whole is very strong in data and data sharing. We have a ID number for over 70 years. I don't know in the UK, but in Sweden, the healthcare sector is almost 99% digitalized. It receives imaging, all of it is completely digitalized. Appointments, everything. Another area of strength, imaging. So we have seen a lot of VR, augmented reality imaging, and this is also very much related to the microwave technology and others used in the automotive industry. I don't want to mention another sectors talking about the life science sector, but the reality is that most of our sectors are working together, so we don't see life sciences just like a sector. We are focusing on tech because we believe that the future is about everybody working together, not only between sectors, but also small companies, large companies, and hopefully, because we really want international collaborations. So we are open to the world.
Is there cooperation between Gothenburg and
the
Malmö
Nordics?
and
Yes.
and
So
Stockholm?
because Sweden is a very small country, 11 million people, I am right now talking about Gothenburg. But as soon as I leave Gothenburg, I start talking about Sweden and even the Nordics. So when we go to BIO in the US, to BIO Korea, to BIO Japan, we go together with one brand, the Nordic Life Science, because we understand that critical mass is important. So even though I'm now saying Gothenburg, the Nordics is the password for us. We are small, but we are very innovative, and we are very eager to collaborate with countries that can share the same culture that we share, and which is openness, to be honest.
So even within Europe, do people tend to think of that cluster, Copenhagen and Malmö, and not about Gothenburg? Is Gothenburg kind of an
Gothenburg is known as this large city acting as a town. I, as a Gothenburg person, see it as a strength, but I can imagine that some people can say, here, how can I explain it? So when you go to Copenhagen and Stockholm, you are in a more international big city. Here we are used to sharing. You just trust people. So I think that's something that if you ask around, you will notice. That is something that characterizes Gothenburg a lot. And I don't really know why is it. I don't know, to be honest. One thing here is also that we don't have so many national agencies because we are not the capital of Sweden, but we have a lot of industries. So Gothenburg is very much an industry-driven, industry-funded city. And the large companies are the ones driving it. So I am from the public sector, but I have to recognize it. That is really public-private partnership, but very much driven by the industry. So yes, we compete a little bit with Stockholm and the other cities in the Nordics, but that's something that we do, I would say, on a win-win, and we forget that internal kind of thing as soon as we leave the country.
And as far as growth is concerned, what do you see as being like, 5 years from now, 10 years from now? How do you see Gothenburg in that scene?
So that's something that you might have noticed, but 5 years from now, I see the scale-ups and the tech industry actually being more presence within the life science sector. We already have a lot of collaborations between quantum companies and pharma companies, large AI companies and pharma companies. I also think that the European health data space and everything that is going on is going to make an impact on the whole life sciences. So I see more and more cross-sectorial collaborations, to be honest. I believe a lot in the biotech, biopharma, but I started to realize that even companies like AstraZeneca, Sanofi, etc., they have been scouting more and more for digital AI, even sustainability companies, even clean tech. So we have seen it. I don't know where you have noticed it in the UK, but it seems like the sector has started to move to more tech and let this kind of traditional biopharma.
As well as being very good at what she does, Iris was incredibly helpful while I was at the event. On top of the fact that she was in meetings, doing presentations, and she also found the time to keep finding me and introducing me to people to do interviews. So I really appreciated that, even though sometimes I had no idea who I was talking to initially. Although having said that, I do enjoy those. So it's clear that she's got her finger on the pulse of Gothenburg's life sciences industry. It's a very vibrant scene and a very vibrant city. For the third interview this week, we have a conversation about Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease. It's something that I'd not actually heard of until I did an interview about it about 3 years ago now. So to give us an overview of the disease and how companies and researchers are trying to find treatments, we chatted with Laura MacNeill, CEO of the Charcot-Marie-Tooth Research Foundation. All right, so first then, I wonder if you could set the scene and tell us a bit about Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease.
Yeah, so first, I'm Laura MacNeill. I'm the CEO of the CMT Research Foundation. Our foundation was founded specifically to advance treatments and cures for Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease. This disease was named in 1886 by three neurologists whose last names were Charcot-Marie and Tooth, so it has nothing to do with your teeth. But as of today, there's no FDA-approved treatment for this disease. CMT is a progressive, degenerative neurological disorder that affects your peripheral nerves. These nerves control movement and sensation in your arms, your hands, your legs, and your feet. So the disease results in muscle weakness, numbness, sensory loss, and nerve degeneration that worsens over time. These symptoms can come on, depending on your genetic subtype, really early in life, as in you're not hitting your early milestones to sit up, hold your head up, crawl, walk, etc. Or you can go most of your life into your 40s, 50s, or 60s before you start to feel the onset of symptoms. This disease is considered rare, so it's affecting about 1 in 2,500 people in the United States and more than 3 million people worldwide. It has absolutely no consideration to gender, race, or ethnic background. It's an inherited disease, so inherited diseases always start somewhere. So there are cases where the family does not experience this disease, and someone born in this lifetime right now could be the first person to have a genetic mutation that causes CMT. But we know many, many families that have multiple generations of the disease, and that could also span out into siblings, cousins, aunts and uncles. And so when you are in this and you have this disease, it's very much an all day, every day, full life experience.
And there are different kinds of CMT disease?
Yeah, right now we know about 139 genetic mutations. So the genes, we've identified the genes that can cause a specific mutation of CMT. We also have hundreds of what we call VUSs, we know that this gene is a variant that might be able to cause disease, but we don't have enough information to specifically say we know it's going to cause this specific CMT. So that work is well underway with genetic mapping and more genetic testing, which helps us identify families that, oh, you also have this gene mutation, and then you also have CMT. So that mapping continues to happen, and more gene variants and subtypes are coming out all the time. The most common CMT types are CMT1, which affects the myelin sheath, which is the protective coating around your nerve, and that has an autosomal dominant inheritance pattern. CMT2, which affects the axon, which is the inside of the nerve, that also has an autosomal dominant inheritance pattern. CMT4, which is rare, it's severe, it's autosomal recessive in its inheritance. Also, it's not as common, but it's very severe. And then we also have CMTX, and X is an X-linked inheritance. So it actually follows the X chromosome when it's passed down through family members. Each subtype is unique in its features, and when explaining CMT and your symptoms, if you're a patient, between these categories and many others, your experience could be completely different from the person sitting next to you.
Are those nuances difficult to diagnose?
Typically, so you can be clinically diagnosed with CMT without a genetic profile right now, today. And I would say if maybe in the last 15 years, genetics became much more widely available. Before that, you might have just been clinically diagnosed, which includes a medical history, nerve conduction study. They're going to put little electrodes on your hands and feet and just see how well is the peripheral nerve sending that electronic signal all the way around your body and back in. And they can tell by the speed of that, the rate of that travel back, whether you have some damage or not. Since the symptoms are so variable and progress so differently, even in siblings. So same genetics, same family history, and one sibling could have a much slower progression of their disease, where the other one could be much more severe in the way that sets on, makes it really difficult for clinicians and neurologists to really see what this is. The other variation and the problem is that 60%, it's estimated, I think, as more people realize, oh, that thing I have that my mom or my dad had, that maybe neuropathy or circulation or tripping or trouble with balance is actually a disease, right? And that's called CMT. The more we get awareness around this, more people will come forward and realize that this is what they had. But right now, we think that 60% of the community, of the CMT known community, has CMT1A. And that has a very specific onset. It can vary a little bit, but it's a pretty typical progression. You have these classic high foot arches, what they call hammer toes, which is when your toes start to actually bend under the pressure of your high foot arch, and your feet actually become deformed over time. Your muscles waste because the nerve damage onsets earlier. So you'll have not only lack of feeling and not being able to sense things in your feet and your hands, but you're actually going to have muscle deformity, muscle wasting. And so you have a visible turn in of your hands and your feet. Those folks are what I think you would typically think of, or if you Google CMT, Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease, that's what you're going to see images of. But that's only one generic variant of 139 others. Some look like that, maybe, some really don't. So when a neurologist is presented with someone who has maybe neuropathy, or I just feel like I'm not balanced or I'm tripping more, they might spend time just figuring out a ton of other diseases before they really think about CMT.
Right. I was going to ask, are there similarities with other conditions that make the diagnosis difficult?
In some cases, I think if you have a later onset and your symptoms aren't as severe or as obvious, you're maybe you have a high foot arch, maybe you have one hammer toe, but it's not a very severe case, they might think it's something else. They're going to do a rule out diagnosis. If a genetic test is considered, that's great. But as I said at the top, we have hundreds of these variants of unspecified significance. So many, many people present with a clear presentation of neuropathy. It's an inherited pattern. They might have some muscle wasting or weakness in their hands and feet. They might start to have this turn in and sort of problems with their bone structure in those areas. But when they run the genetic test, it's not obvious that it's Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease. So that becomes really difficult. I also think, Jim, when there's a treatment, then there's a real clear path to diagnosis and understanding. And so the lack of any FDA-approved treatment for this disease has left this space really uncertain and unfinished. And as we start to see treatments come forward, even for one subtype, it should help us become clearer with understanding all of the subtypes.
Are there any companies or even academia working on improving early detection or diagnosis?
Yes, there's many, and maybe more now than ever. We tracked from 2019 to today, and there's been a 360% increase in the number of biotechs that are working on CMT treatment approaches. Now, because there's 139 different variants, gene causations, it's going to take a while, right? Like everybody's trying to find the best way to attack this, but each approach looks and feels different based on what exactly is happening. And I'll give you a good example of this. CMT1A is that most prominent subtype. What's happening for those patients is they have an overproduction of a protein called PMP22. They have an extra copy of the gene that produces that protein. So they're getting a ton of extra PMP22, which causes their peripheral nerve damage and their muscle wasting and all of that. Another subtype of CMT is called CMT1E, and CMT1E has an underproduction of PMP22. They don't make enough. And so when you're trying to figure out a drug development, a targeted therapy for, let's say, 1A, if you overshoot the target, you can actually cause 1E, and vice versa. And so it becomes really challenging to be able to figure out exactly what needs to happen here with very deep precision. And the other big challenge with treatment, Jim, is the peripheral nerve in a human is really long. Now, I'm 5'9", so I have a huge wingspan. And so for me to be able to get a therapy all the way out to a fingertip or the very tip of your toes takes a lot of science and precision. And so when therapies are working in smaller primates like mice, rats, or monkeys, for example, it might show great efficacy, but we need to make sure it's going to happen in an adult human or, the human body and get that therapy all the way out to where the damage is starting to be able to make a real difference.
I know you said that there are no specific treatments, but what do people with this condition and the very many variants of it, what do they currently do in order to alleviate those symptoms?
Yeah, right now it's predominantly physical therapy. Some folks who are experiencing that weak muscle wasting will have braces or splints to help them continue to be mobile and walk and be active. Pain medication, nerve medication. There's some orthopedic devices or surgeries that might be able to correct some of the damage that's happening and help folks to continue to move. And that's the very best thing that you can do. The disease is taking away the muscle in your hands and your feet. So as that nerve dies, that signal is dying. And the very best thing that you can do right now is just try to stay as strong as possible. But you are working against a real disease that is taking away that feeling and function. So folks can stay strong as long as they can, but ultimately we need a real therapeutic to stop the damage.
And you mentioned that some companies are working on detection. Are there a lot of companies also working on treatments?
Yeah, we have tons of innovative approaches coming. This includes gene editing. So if you have an extra gene, like our 1A folks that's getting that extra PMP22, can we create a gene therapy that can just knock that extra gene out? And then suddenly we're back to a healthy functioning amount of PMP22. So things like that are being looked at. Yeah, as the CMT Research Foundation, we're also funding projects in small molecules. We're looking at advanced delivery systems. So, you have a great compound that can really help solve this problem, but how do we deliver it to the peripheral nervous system without it going everywhere else? And so there's a lot of different approaches for all different subtypes happening now, which is a really exciting position for this entire disease space to be in after so many years of not having any advancements.
Could you maybe connect those dots a little bit in terms of telling me a bit more about the CMT Research Foundation and what you do and how that connects to the treatments being developed?
Yeah. So CMT Research Foundation, as I said, we're founded to advance treatments and cures for CMT. That's all we do. We are hyper-focused on making that happen. There are foundations in the space that help with patients today, education and community engagement, and we are so grateful that they're there. But our carve-out mission is only to make sure that there are treatments and therapies for all CMT patients. And so with that being all we do, we raise money, and that money gets deployed directly to high impact research. Our scientific advisory board and our research advisory council are made up of world-leading experts in this disease, and in some cases, some maybe cousin diseases like ALS, where we can learn from what they're doing in their disease space and help bring those understandings and learnings into CMT. So we have this wonderful group of advisors that help us. We accept applications for grants and issue out grants. But the difference with us, and some other foundations do this as well, but we have a venture philanthropy approach to all of our grants. So instead of just committing, let's say $500,000 to this project and giving $500,000 to the project, we actually put together scientific milestones, and we'll say, all right, we're going to give you $500,000, but we're going to start with $130,000, and then you need to get to this point to keep proving your concept, your approach. We really love what you're doing. Show it in the data here. And if you're showing it, then we'll give you another $130,000, right? All the way up until they have proved out this concept. If, let's say, that first milestone isn't proving out, it's not showing the efficacy of the approach. It was a great idea, but wow, it just isn't working. We aren't going to deploy the remaining funds there. We'll say, okay, now it's time to take those precious donor dollars and we're going to put that towards the next exciting project. So it allows us to stay incredibly nimble and very thoughtful with every dollar a donor gives us. The other side of venture philanthropy is we have a different seat at the table. We are investors in the project. And so we can bring forward experts, we can make connections that are going to help that product make it all the way through to a clinical trial and, hopefully into a patient. And so if that project succeeds, and let's say they get bought out by a bigger company that's going to help bring it all the way to market, we get a payout for that return. So we get whatever the share value worth is that we've negotiated, and that return goes right back into investing more research. And so this model, we believe, is the fastest way to get treatments to Charcot-Marie-Tooth patients that need them so desperately.
And how do you determine who's going to get those funds? I mean, what criteria do you use? I guess it must vary, but
it does vary, and the projects are pretty open-ended. We can get projects that have broad application that are working on maybe endpoint data. So that's the specific criteria that the FDA agrees and the project will commit to say, this is how we're going to measure our drug's efficacy. So that endpoint data is really important. So we might fund a project like that because that's going to help the entire clinical trial model for CMT move forward. Or we might help invest in the drug manufacturing for a gene therapy, which is what we recently did with Alpida Therapeutics. How we grade that is really through these advisory boards that I mentioned. A scientific advisory board takes a deep, hard look at the research projects when they come in at a proposal position, and they provide with their expertise in the space if they think that project has the ability to make it or not. And we do a lot of deep thought meetings and figuring out, does this project really has potential? And what would it mean for the greater impact of drug development for CMT? And if it passes there, it goes to our Research Advisory Council, which advises our board of directors to say, looking at our mission, looking at our entire portfolio, this project really does fit what we do, and we really need to find a way to fund it. We have to fund this project. Then it goes up to our board, and our board is ultimately the decision maker on the funding of that project. And all of the metrics, I would say, to simplify it, is, will this advance treatments for CMT faster, more effectively? And or if it's an exact treatment, does this have the ability to make it to clinical trials? So a lot of evaluation comes into that based on other similar diseases, how they're moving along, how their gene therapies are doing, and taking a look at the full spectrum of CMT treatment and saying, yeah, we really need to fund this. We have the responsibility to make sure that this project proves itself out either way. We don't consider projects that we fund that don't go forward failures. We're learning and learning and learning and learning. And so our consideration isn't as specific today. It's more, tell us what you're working on. We will bless it with expertise. And if we fund it, we're going to be your partner, and we're going to be right there with you to make sure that you have the best chance at success.
You mentioned Alpida, and it's one of the most recent partnerships or some of the work that you've been doing. I wonder if you could tell me a little bit more about that one.
Yeah, Alpida Therapeutics is developing a gene therapy for a very rare CMT called CMT4J. This is a very severe early onset CMT that actually affects your entire system, including your breathing, swallowing. So this moves very quickly from your fingertips and your toes all the way into your core. And some patients might be completely wheelchair bound and need assisted devices to help them breathe or clear mucus out of their chest by the time they're teenagers. It's a very severe form of CMT. Alpida Therapeutics is led by their CEO, whose son was born with a very rare genetic disorder. It was not CMT. If you want to read about it, the entire story is up online. But he dropped his entire life to raise $3 million to develop a gene therapy for his son, knowing that he had a matter of years to be able to make a real difference for him. And he was successful in achieving that. And his son did receive this gene therapy, and a few other patients with this really rare genetic disorder were able to achieve some positive results. So Alpida Therapeutics became a real sharp object against ultra rare forms of genetic diseases. And so they've now included several other diseases in their portfolio. And with this particular approach, they're using an AAV9 vector technology to deliver therapeutic genes directly to the affected nerve cells. And they collaborate closely with us and the CMT4J Foundation, which specifically raises money and awareness and drives research for CMT4J. So it's a beautiful collaboration that we have to bring forward this gene therapy approach. And what we've recently funded is the manufacturing of the drug. What's happening here with Elpida's approach, which is ELP-02, that's the particular AAV9 therapy that they're working on. It delivers a healthy FIG4 gene copy to the nervous system, which is targeting the underlying genetic defect that's responsible for this severe subtype. So the goal is to restore that nerve function and stop any further degeneration of therapies. So we do have FDA clearance. We have the go forward. There are several steps in the process. So as we manufacture the drug, Elpida is working hard to make sure everything's lined up so those patients can receive the first real treatment that can help stop or turn their life around, which is incredibly important for them. I think it's exciting too, Jim, that this is a targeted gene therapy for CMT. And so although this is specific for 4J patients, there are several other types of CMT that we believe can have great benefit from gene therapy. And so the execution and running of this trial in particular is going to give the entire scientific community who's hard at work to try to bring a therapy forward a very clear understanding of how this is going to work for CMT. So although this trial is for 4J patients, if you're listening to this and you have some other subtype of CMT, every CMT patient should be excited about this because it's going to help the entire field understand if this is a real true approach for CMT or not, or what all the in-between data points are to help the next trial perform even better. And so we're excited and holding our breath for all CMT patients through this trial.
How important is awareness of CMT? I mean, it's something that until I did an interview about it 2 years ago, I'd never heard of it. So how do you get the message across and how do you improve that message?
Yeah, CMT awareness is really important for a lot of reasons. I'll just pick two. In terms of individual family understanding of symptoms that they might see being pretty pervasive within their family, but they don't have a name for it. Having a name for a disease and finding a community that understands your daily struggles is incredibly important. And I think due to the understanding of CMT, the genetic profiling, the ability to find the answer to that question is more available now than ever. And so a generation alive today with these symptoms, if they follow the path to rule in or rule out CMT, might really understand this is what's been happening for generations of my family. And now I know what to anticipate for the generations behind me. And I can be a real educator of what this is, right? Versus, well, we all trip a lot. We all, have poor circulation in our hands. We all maybe have a funny way we walk when we're later, which is drop foot. But they don't really have a real name for it. So they can't find their community. And that community is here and ready to help them. So I think more education and awareness might find some of these families that are maybe suspects of CMT. They have symptoms, but they're not so advanced or so life altering that they just live with them. They don't really have a name for it. So I would love more awareness just to help those families have a direction to go to if they really do want to understand and find people who have the same lived experience. The other real importance of awareness is finding those families and having them test and find the exact genetic causation that they have. It's not only going to get our CMT numbers more accurate. Right now we say 1 in 2,500, but if we tested the entire community of the United States, we'd probably find that number to be significantly different. So we'd get a more accurate read, but we would also be able to invite participants, patients that are willing to very specific trials. And once you know your subtype from this genetic testing, you can keep an eye out for trials that might benefit you. Or if drugs are approved by subtype, you'd know if that's a drug that you could or should take, right? And so as we start to understand more and the science gets more readily available, more awareness is just more important than ever to get all of that balanced out. Those numbers, everybody's genetic test, and being able to be a steward for your family to say, I'm keeping an eye on this particular company because they're working on a therapy that affects our family directly. And this might be something that could really change the course of lives for our family members. And if you're curious about that, CMTRF.org, we list out those broad categories of CMT1 to 4NX on our website. But we also have a list of all of the projects that we're funding, and we explain that for folks that aren't necessarily PhD research scientists, right? What this project is doing and how it's going to impact patients, what we think it's going to do. And then we also list all of the clinical trials that we know of that are active for CMT. So you don't have to go to clinicaltrials.gov. You can go directly to our site, and upcoming trials that we know will be coming, but they're not open yet. And so you can really engage and start a conversation with us about, hey, can you keep me posted on how this is moving along? Because I really am interested in participating. And then we can help you, if you're interested in a trial, to get connected to those members of that team.
And what about the general awareness with the general public, I guess, because people know what ALS is and MS and Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. Is there value in increasing awareness with the general public and maybe in terms of fundraising or?
Yeah, I think, and Jim, I didn't mention in this interview, but my family has CMT in our family. So it runs through my father's maternal line. And I also have CMT. I was actually diagnosed right as I was coming on as CEO of this foundation. And I already have 2 kids in the world. And I don't know if they have it yet or not. But I'm one of those families that kind of is lost in the mix, doesn't really have a clear understanding of what this is, and have a really front row seat of watching some pretty natural situations where that person might not perform as well. Like hand-eye coordination just might not be their strength, or they drop things more often, or they trip more often, they're more clumsy. And instead of saying, I'm clumsy, the empathy of being able to say, I have a disease that affects my ability to be able to move quickly. And so with kids and young adults, being able to explain to them in a way to understand that this is not something that they can control. They can't strengthen themselves to become better at this sport, and being able to have a lot of empathy there, right? And being able to speak about it. When I became public with this foundation as the CEO, but also as a patient, I had so many people from my high school, my previous employers, my neighborhood come forward with their own CMT experiences. It's in my family, or my stepbrother has this, right? I'm not genetically connected, but someone I care about has this disease. And so the empathy and understanding it can provide to know that this isn't anything that's their fault. It's not anything they can do differently, and how you can better support them so they can continue to have the life experience that they want. A good example of this is all over the news right now with Alan Jackson, the country music singer. And Alan Jackson is one of my favorite country music artists. And that's not because of CMT, connection. He's just a great artist. He's been around for so long with so many great hits. But he has become very open and public about his CMT because it's affecting his ability to perform on stage. And so bringing awareness like that, saying, I'm not intoxicated, I walk different because, the muscles in my feet have died, and I just can't hold myself up. And I don't know that's his case, but as an example, is really important for the entire community to know. I think also the inheritance pattern, when we really hear about these families where, there's 4 kids and 3 of the kids have CMT, and so does one of the parents, and so does a grandparent, you can really understand the burden that carries. And I think that folks that are philanthropic out there that want to help the world be a better place, if they knew more about really the depth and breadth of how this disease affects families, I think that they would very much enjoy participating in a solution for this disease.
What do you see as the future of CMT treatments?
I think with the amount of companies working on this, with the right donor support, it's incredibly important that we have resources to deploy for really exciting, maybe innovative types of research approaches to drug development. I think that we can start seeing some treatments come forward in the next couple of years. And now, that treatment might be specific for one subtype. And as we said, this is a complicated umbrella of different experiences and gene causations within the CMT diagnosis, right? So we are going to have to continue to press on even past those first few therapies to make sure there's a treatment and an option for all types of CMT. So it will be a long road forward, but once those first therapies come to market, Jim, and they're really effective, it's like the first domino to fall. And then I think people will start to understand and hear about CMT more often. And you might be able to have your neurologist maybe offer that as a solution earlier in the diagnosis experience because there's therapy to prove that might be able to reverse and treat that disease. So I see a major change of wind and direction coming for this disease. I think we're already feeling that difference compared to maybe 7 years ago when CMT Research Foundation was founded. And there's just such incredible, innovative, exciting science happening. It's going to absolutely make a difference for these patients. So more awareness, more focus on treatments, and then creating that domino effect is what I anticipate over the next 5 to 10 years.
And I suspect as well that as more treatments get introduced into other diseases and other areas, there might be treatments for something else that might apply to CMT and vice versa. Or there might be, combination therapies. And so it's quite exciting that there's so much going on.
Yeah, absolutely. We do believe, again, one of the pillars to getting this treatment out the fastest is to partner with some of these other diseases that have a similar problem, let's say, for delivery of a medicine, and really working with them and gaining knowledge from their experts so that we can bring that information forward for CMT and see where and how it's applicable for the peripheral nervous system. But it's absolutely going to be, and it already is, a very big uptick in activity. Lots of clinical trials starting, global meetings, bringing in experts on the peripheral nerve, and it's going to help us translate this message out to everybody else. And so, my anticipation is that this disease can and will be solved. I think, I don't know the timeline. I have no magic ball, but, I'm very proud to support this foundation, not only as a patient, but because I believe that we are going to be able to line everything up correctly to make a massive difference for not just one patient, but a patient who has multiple generations of family members that are also affected by this disease. And I'm very proud to be able to make that difference in their lives.
Ultimately, when it comes right down to that treatment in the future, are you thinking that it's something that can be completely cured, or that it can stop something or stop CMT in its tracks or turn it back a little bit? What's your vision for that?
All of the above. I think it depends on the exact disease, which subtype you have, how severe your symptoms are, and then which approach you're going to have. So some of the work that we fund is attacking the actual cause of the disease. So that would mean that we are actually modifying the disease itself so that that disease doesn't exist anymore, right? And that would be a good example with a gene therapy approach. But we also support work that's working on the symptoms. How can we help diminish or reverse the neuropathy that you feel and help protect the nerve signal so that you don't have muscle wasting? That's not really curing that patient of CMT, but it will significantly change how long they can remain strong and active and mobile and, having a normal range of function. And so we're working on both, Jim, because I think with all the variations in this disease, we're going to have a lot of different approaches in order to meet and improve the quality of life for everybody with this disease. So the answer is all of the above. We're going to do all of it. What comes first is a great question. I don't know. We have trials in place right now that are working on stopping and reversing neuropathy. And we also have trials like the CMT4J project, the LPTA project, that is a gene editing project. It's a disease modifier. And so I'm very grateful that researchers are approaching this from so many different angles because I think it's highly important and very necessary.
And I guess it ties back in with the diagnosis aspect of it too, because I would imagine in some cases, the stage at which you're able to intervene would make a big difference.
Absolutely, absolutely. And if you know you have that gene, if you're carrying it, that's how it's worked so far for a few other diseases like SMA, which has some gene therapies approved. Once that therapy was approved, they knew the earlier they can introduce the therapy, the better quality of life for patients who have this diagnosis. And so early newborn screening, became available for that disease. And so this is the way that the scientific community and the medical community can attack diseases like this. But first, we need the effective treatment. And then we can start finding a way to get that into more patients and get them into patients at the right time so that it can be the most effective.
Incredible to think about all those disease variations and the great work that's being done on CMT. And also odd in that Alan Jackson was mentioned there, someone I interviewed in the early 1990s when I was editor of a music magazine. Little did I know he'd be getting another mention 30 years later on something called a podcast. I'm so glad that I don't have to edit reel-to-reel tape anymore like we had to way back when I was on the radio. I wasn't that bad at it, but some of the people at the radio station were like lightning. Before I'd even got set up, they were usually finished. It's probably why they did all the hard lifting and I just prattled on over the air to a lot of southwest Ontario. And if the weather was cooperating, parts of Pennsylvania and New York as well. And I think once we even reached Michigan. Those were the days. Now that we're global with pretty much everything, no one can really appreciate the joy of getting a phone call at the station to say that they were listening in from Erie, Pennsylvania. I digress, as always. Anyway, that's it for this week's podcast. If you do want to get in touch with guest opportunities or if you want to advertise, please feel free to contact us at jim@deeptechdigest.com. And just a reminder, we do not charge people to be guests on the podcast. Next week's podcast will be going out on Black Friday, which seems to be a thing everywhere now. Although here in the UK, it's never as exciting as some of the sales in the US. When I lived there, the stack of flyers in the newspaper just before Black Friday was huge. It was easily the biggest newspaper of the year, and it was compelling to go through. You almost had to plan a route with precision. Anyway, if you're in the US, have a great Thanksgiving next week, and you can listen to the podcast while you're staking out the bargains. I still haven't quite decided which interviews to include next week, as we do have a bit of a backlog going right now. But that's a good problem to have. So until next week, wherever in the world you are, I hope you have a great week ahead. Thanks for listening, and I hope you'll join us again next time for another Base to Base Biotech podcast. The Base to Base Biotech podcast is an Air Coastal Media Limited production.